Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 99 of Tapcaf Transmissions. I am one of your hosts, Corey, joined by, you're never going to guess this one, the other host of Tapcaf Transmissions, Mr. EckhartsLadder. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm good. Very glad to be joining you on this Wayne Gretzky of podcast episodes.
Wow, that's we're already into the NHL talk.
Mm-hmm.
After the response to the Jedi Academy episode, you'd think we wouldn't go off topic quite so fast. But
You miss 100% of the NHL shots you don't take.
That's true. That's where that
podcast shots.
That's where that quote comes from. Podcasting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Wayne was real big into podcasting between absolutely just destroying the NHL. Good for him.
Well, they called him the Great One.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tonight, this is episode 99, so it's not a book episode. It's primarily a Q&A episode. We've got a bunch of emails that have been sent in that I have gathered a bunch of questions from, some going back a few episodes. But we're also going to talk a little bit about the first 99 episodes of the podcast, look back at the Bantam era, because we are moving into the Del Rey era. Doesn't mean there won't be any Bantam stuff coming up. There's still a few books we have to go back and read. But Yuzhan Vong it's a big jump in Star Wars progression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. It's been 99, pretty much 2 years. I'd say, because we've missed more than 5 weeks. So we've been doing this for over 2 years. Still no intro song. I have been reaching out to people finally. I'll be curious to see where the next 99 bring us, how we've changed the format, whether I've finally decided to ditch your ass or vice versa. But yeah, any really fun memories? Anything you think about when you think of the first 99 episodes?
Not really. I think it's all been pretty subpar so far, but there are the 2 episodes that we don't count because they were about I think we did one on EA Play, and there were 2 gaming related episodes that we had Mark from Templin on that we don't count towards the actual episode count, so this could be seen as episode 102, but we don't.
I gotta go through because iTunes I think has some of those for some reason. Like the numbering on iTunes is a bit weird, so I gotta go through and delete 2 of them just so the numbers sync up. But yeah, for me, when I think of the first 9 episodes, I think of all the nights where I've drastically been behind where I need to be on book reading, so I'm just lying on my couch, just trying to tackle some fucking Star Wars book from mid 1995, just or just the Rogue Squadron books. For some reason, I end up crushing a lot of those in one night while walking or something. And yeah, that's kind of what I think about, especially when we were doing it one book weekly, which was a lot.
I think the highlights have been some of the guest episodes as well, though. So we've had Star Wars Explained on a few times. The first one for that is one of the
Chill.
I mean, you don't have to bring your drama up onto this podcast, but
it's not my drama. He's the shill. We're just joking.
People are going to take this seriously, but
but we're just joking.
We were very drunk with him last week. We were also very drunk with him on his first podcast appearance. So
yeah, we have a problem.
But yeah, so we had Alex on for those episodes. We had Ilkin on, and we're going to have him on next week with Vector Prime. We had Evil Bob the Bob, or Andrew, Dr. Fuller on for
that was a good episode.
Star Wars Science episode, which I do think we got to do another one of those.
Yeah.
I think he'd be up for it. Maybe even get
I don't know how much. The problem is we've kind of ran through all the science that does exist.
Well, he also does read Star Wars stuff. So as a former guest, we talked about this a little bit off the podcast. We do talk off stream and off the podcast. We shouldn't, because that's content that we're just throwing down the drain. But yeah, I would personally, Eck was very against this, but I would like to get some more guests on for the NJO episodes.
I was super against that. I was that sounds like a terrible idea. He just hated it. Yeah.
But yeah, so that could be a thing that we try to do a little bit more. I do want to get, on top of you working on the whole song situation, I do want to get a better background or layout. I think the thing you were talking about that other podcasts use a lot, like the auto layout kind of thing, which is a background image that scales dynamically, is probably a better way to go.
Yeah, maybe what's StreamYards? That's one thing that does that. But yeah. So on our end, we will definitely be trying to increase production. some podcasts go fully, like they fully edit the audio out completely. So I'm not sure if that would really fit the way our podcast works, but maybe for intros and outros. I've been doing things. I've been doing a bit more careful work with sound editing lately.
Okay.
Like I now make sure that all the background noise is fully removed. I normalize the audio a bit more. I just do a bit more work now, kind of making the audio sound good. And I think if you listen to our first episode, especially, where I think since then we've both upgraded mics as well, it sounds a
Yeah.
lot better.
I think I was using a Snowball back then, and now I'm on a Rode NT USB, which I do want to upgrade from because I could probably do better. But
The next stage is like going with the full XLR setup, or like
yeah,
something that's not USB based anyway.
yeah. We've kind of more recently slid into more specific roles rather than, okay, this is your episode, this is mine. I've been doing more of the pre-production, you've been doing the post-production. It's been much smoother that way.
Yeah, it has.
But,
It has. Okay, so is there one book, because I've been thinking of things that I want to talk about. Is there one book that either caught you by surprise in a good or a bad way, one that you haven't read before? Like, what are some books when you think of this podcast that kind of come to mind? I've got a few as well.
I think there's one element of that we'll probably both have a similar answer on, and MedStar was not one that I expected to enjoy anywhere near as much as I did.
Yeah.
And that's kind of become one of the highlights for us. So MedStar is probably the biggest like difference in where I was expecting it to end up versus where it did end up in a positive direction. Maybe because it's so recent that Survivor's Quest is kind of the opposite direction for me.
Yeah.
But
yeah, MedStar was definitely one for me too, and I also have to say Ronin was one that I was not expecting to like nearly as much as I did. I was hoping I would feel differently about the Bane series than I did, because I was kind of famously not a fan of that. But I guess for me, another one would be the Alphabet Squadron books, because I don't know if you remember, but I went in kind of I'd read Alphabet Squadron 1 once. I think the second came out as we were doing the podcast, or maybe before, but I was not excited at all. And then when I reread 1, I actually ended up really loving it. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, like MedStar is the one that I had read before. MedStar and Survivor's Quest are the ones that I had read before and then had a very different opinion of afterwards. But I think Alphabet Squadron is probably the biggest surprise that I've had, of just like no expectations going in, but it's definitely among my favorite Star Wars books just overall.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at what we have for our distribution here of our rankings. Are there any other ones that kind of stand out for you? I just want to see the number we have. There we go.
I guess I wasn't surprised, but I was very pleased that I enjoyed the books that I thought I would like as much as I did. Like, there was a part of me, because it had been like a couple of years since I'd read Thrawn. It's like, do I still like this as much as I thought I did? And yeah, the Thrawn trilogy, that is. Same with Plagueis. Like, I knew that I really loved that book, and of course I still did really love it. Other than that, yeah, I don't know. It's been I guess Crystal Star is one that I liked more than I thought I did last time I read it, I guess.
There are definitely a lot of them that we were kind of almost dreading going in, and then like there were very few that were like
outright
really
painful.
just And I think for me, another one in kind of the negative direction was the Jedi Academy trilogy, where I didn't have like the fondest memories of it, but going back into it, it was another one that just didn't do it for me.
Yeah, no, I'm totally there as well, especially the third one. Yeah, no, I agree. And then Young Jedi Knights was kind of another pleasant surprise, where that one I'd only ever read as a kid. And that was kind of, we've talked about this a bunch of times, that was one of my first introductions to the EU. But I was, probably 12. So I was glad that I still enjoyed that so much, especially where those were ones we kind of crushed on a weekly basis. So there was a very real possibility of getting just tired of it.
Yeah, that was also, I think, either a low point for the podcast or high point of criticism for the podcast, because they're very, like, there's not a lot that happened to the books. They're very straightforward, not a lot to discuss. So doing one episode at a time, that's where we had a lot of the digressions, and people weren't super thrilled with a lot of those. But looking at the ratings we have so far, we've each got 5 that we rated S, and only 2 that we rated at like the bottom tier. And I think even then we've been kind of clear on like that doesn't mean it's horrible, just that like if we're gonna use the ranking scale, then there's gonna be some Star Wars books that just end up on F.
Yeah. So you want to go over those, the S's and the F's as well, just for context?
Yeah. So for both of us, we gave Planet of Twilight an F, which
that was one I was not at all surprised with, because I remember hating that book.
Yeah, and then for me, I gave Champions of the Force an F. You gave that a D. And your other F is Children of the Jedi, which I gave a D.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I really didn't like that book.
Yeah.
And then what about the S's?
So our S's are a lot broader. So we both got Darth Plagueis as kind of the top of our S's. Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, Alphabet Squadron Victory's Price, Revenge of the Sith novelization, and do we have any? Nope. I think we both have the exact same S's right now.
Okay. Cool.
We got a little bit more difference in the middle, but we've been pretty consistent overall.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm not necessarily surprised, especially we may have talked ourselves into it.
I think you've pushed up, like whenever we do the rankings, just the way you talk about the Thrawn trilogy ends up pushing me like one higher on at least one of them. It's a problem I have. I'm very suggestible.
Yeah. I think there have been a few maybe that have gone the other way too, where maybe your opinions lowered some for me.
You just like them a lot. It really bothered me.
Yeah. But yeah. Any other like high or low moments of the podcast for you generally? I remember one podcast I was like, I had a stomach bug or something, and I really need to crap my pants the whole time. I don't know. I don't think I had to leave it. I think I had to kind of like message you and be like, end this early.
Yeah. You were really sick for one of them, and then we ended it relatively early. Well, actually, I think that was at the time when a lot of the episodes were going 2
Really
hours.
long.
So I think we were like an hour and 15 in already when that happened. So I think we've tightened that up a little bit better. But
yeah, we used to go really long for some of them.
Some of the early ones were like 3 hours.
Yeah.
But is there a moment in any of the books that really stands out as being super memorable? Like a top 1 or top 5 moments?
Do you have any picked out? Because I got to think about that.
I have. I've been kind of low-key trying to keep track of the best death scenes ever since we talked about Ton Fannin's.
And yeah, he's obviously the best.
Yeah, that just stands out in general as like one of the better moments in any of the books. And even that, like some of the scenes towards the end of Victory's Price, like Belle talking to her former boss, but
yeah, really good moments. One that's memorable for me for some reason is when what's her name gets her arm cut off.
Leia? Yeah, that was a weird.
No. Why am I forgetting her name when I just said it's a memorable moment?
In which book?
In the Young Jedi Knights.
Tenel Ka.
Tenel Ka, yeah, when she gets her arm cut off. I don't know why. I found it to be a somewhat memorable moment.
I mean, it was pretty impactful on a character who plays a major role and never really like in a lot of Star Wars stuff. They lose their arm and then look, you get a identical one put back on. And Tenel Ka is like, no, I'm sticking with this. Yeah. So it has a lot of impact there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other kind of when I think of Star Wars EU, what moments I think of. I think finding the Katana fleet's always a pretty fun one.
Lando upholstery inspector.
Yeah. This is Republic Navy Blue, of course. Can you think of like any just like action scenes, I guess, that are memorable? For one, I always think of the Siege of Coruscant, like when the shields are like up and there's like that one interdictor that's like ready to pull the fleet back if they don't get the message in time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like the battle over Typhera is another big one that I think
Mm-hmm.
is done really well. But I also literally just did a video on it, so it's kind of fresh for me.
Yeah.
So I'm probably a little biased there.
Mm-hmm.
There's also like people getting absorbed by Waru, which stands
Mm-hmm.
out for less positive reasons.
Yeah.
But do you have so before we get into the Yuzon Vong War, do you want to call your shot on any Fs or S's, like any predictions you have based on prior read-throughs of where you think you're gonna if you're gonna do like
I
top
feel
level
like the
Friday?
one where they revisit the sea Ruvi is going to be
Okay.
kind of low for me. Um, I know that I'm gonna have a real tough time with the names as well. Like I always remember the storylines, but I never really remember the names of the books.
That's Force Heretic
Yeah.
Refugee. It's I can never remember the third Force Heretic book name.
Also, I think the one where they go to Coruscant might end up being a low for me.
Oh, the Star Wars book where they go to Coruscant? Yeah, that's really narrows it down.
No, the one where like Coruscant's under Vaughn control and they basically take like the ODST drop pod
Yeah.
in, and then
I
they
think that's
find
the same book.
is it? And then they find
Yeah.
what's his name? And he's a cyborg.
Yeah, they find the Dark Jedi guy.
Yeah, Lord Nyax.
Yeah.
And he's the guy from Children of the Jedi.
Yeah. That I read the Yuzon Vong War books relatively recently, and that like does stand out to me as like a super weird moment. But
I think a high for me may actually be. No, it's been a long time since I've read this one, and I think because of just how like different it is compared to what came before, Vector Prime may end up being a high for me. So it's kind of exciting that you're being introduced to this new enemy.
yeah.
But I enjoyed how the series ended. So the last few books should be pretty good, and Star by Star is always a highlight. And the
I think Trader's gonna be an S for me.
Trader, and what's the one where the Lusankia
Is that
all
no,
the
that's not Edge
Lusankia
of
stuff?
Victory.
I think it is, isn't it? Like both where the Lusankia, for one, it bombards the
Yeah,
Vaughn and
yeah.
then they
It's
drive into the world
yeah.
ship.
Because it's Stackpole. I always get
Yeah.
Stackpole and Alston mixed up for them. I think Alston did Dark Tide and Stackpole did Edge of Victory.
Yeah. Yeah. So those should be good. Those should be good. And I'm excited to read the comics as well because I haven't read all of the comics. I've read the first. I forget it's Invasion and there's I think 3 or 4 different arcs, and I've read the first one but not all of them.
That'll probably be one of the ones where it's useful for us to have those off weeks. We can actually tie it in though.
Yeah,
And I think there's a few short stories too. There's like Elysia with setting up the Peace Brigade. So there's a few short stories that can fit in between all this. So it's going to be a lot of Vong for the next year.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a long time. But yeah, so that's for me. What about you? Any other kind of sleepers or the opposite?
I can never remember if I really like or really hate Dark Journey, so I'm kind of curious to get back to that one. I think
They're
it's
saying you got it backwards, by the way, in chat.
Stackpole did Dark Tide? Okay.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
But
we'll get there in weeks from now.
It's right. I can see if I can make it out on my webcam right now, but yeah, like Star by Star is one that always kind of has a special place for me because it is one of the first Star Wars books that I read and that I remember reading. Yeah. And it has such a big impact on everything that comes after, and like retroactively impacts so much of everything that came before. Like Anakin dies, Jason starts his dark journey, Jaina starts her dark journey. That it's just so long though, and I don't like from my last time reading it. I don't think I left with the impression that it needed to be as long as it was. Like there's a lot of running around in the same 10 square feet of the world ship. I don't think they're even on the world ship until about 200 or 300 pages in. So that'll definitely be an interesting one to get to.
Yeah, totally. Anything else you want to talk about before we get into viewer questions? Anything you'd like to do for the podcast or anything else? I think one thing that I would like to do is get more segments and like, because I like how we talk about news at the beginning usually. So yeah, I'd like to definitely get more kind of segments that would become a normal part of the show as well.
So yeah, one thing that I did want to run by you, which I could have asked you off the podcast, but I thought it would be more fun to do it this way for some reason, is
Mm-hmm.
if we had a segment that was kind of like awards of some kind, since we have so many books we've read for now. Like
Mm-hmm.
if we got a few categories and then did one of the off episodes trying to basically figure out some of those most memorable moments, but with a bit more forethought and planning. Maybe get some viewer submitting categories of
Yeah.
like best battles or MVP authors or something.
Yeah. No, sounds good to me. I'm down.
So that could be a
So
thing
yes.
we can work on. But there
Mm-hmm.
are a few questions that we get kind of regularly. There are a few that we got in the last week or so
Oh
that are
yes.
specifically asking about uh, like if we'll get to specific books.
Mm-hmm.
So just to get to that before we get to the other questions, the the general answer to that is we'll get to it at some point, or the plan is
Mm-hmm.
to get to them at some point. It's just beyond what we have planned for the NJO. It's really hard for us to say when that'd be for anything in
Mm-hmm.
particular.
Yeah, we typically don't really plan super in advance, but there's no book as of yet that I can think of anyway, or no piece of media that we've said no to outright
Yeah.
for any reason. Unless I have to go back to that weird StarWars.com article about incest, like I'm good to read it again or for a first time or whatever.
Yeah.
And we've also talked about, and I think we do still plan to um, talk about non-Star Wars things occasionally as well.
Mhm.
Like I think we will eventually get to a Halo book at some point.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we we should if it's there, we'll get to it eventually.
Yeah, and like with TV shows coming up or even going back and reviewing not reviewing, but like covering individual arcs maybe of former
Mhm.
TV shows.
Yep.
Uh but yeah. We
Yep.
So I tried to collect as many of the questions that were sent in email as possible. And I did try to make sure we'd get to at least one from anyone who sent a question in. So
Mhm.
there were a few people who had a couple questions. We're going to try to go through one from everyone first, then we'll kind of go back through and see if there's anything. There were also a few people who had like kind of similar questions, so I kind of prioritized it based on that. But yeah,
Mhm.
and we'll also try to do some questions in chat too. But we'll start off with some of the email ones, and I will also check if any have been sent in. There has been one email sent in from people who want to offer us food. So not a question. Story Hello Fresh. We'll get to yours eventually. But our first question comes in from Joel, who asks, "How do you feel Vision of the Future works as a send off to the Bantam era? Do you think the few seeds it sets up are honored in NJO, or does NJO really take things its own direction? But it's fitting for Zahn, who kicked off the Bantam era, to be the one who ends it. What do you miss about the Bantam era?" I think we might have answered this last time.
Yeah, I
Don't
think we covered that pretty
Did we?
well. Yeah.
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 Uh. So we'll go down to Joel's next question, which
Cut it
is,
out, editor. Cut it out.
how do you think the Star Wars expanded universe would have evolved if James Luceno and not Tim Zahn had kicked things off?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't even know if James Luceno was writing books in 1991 and 2. Um, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he would have done a good job. I just like they both kind of have similar qualities in that Timothy Zahn obviously borrowed a lot of what he did really well from things like the RPG guides and whatnot.
Mhm.
Um, and James Luceno is obviously pretty happy to reference other works when he does stuff. So yeah, I think I think it would have been good either way, to be honest.
Yeah, like James Luceno is obviously a good author in his own right, but I think the thing that James Luceno does best is, or like the thing that sets him apart from other of the good Star Wars authors is that he does incorporate so much from other places. So you don't
Hmm.
really benefit from that if he's the first one to do it. Uh,
Yeah, and I also don't think that anybody writes as good. In my opinion, anyone has written a Star Wars like story that feels so much of like the movies as the original
yeah.
Thrawn trilogy. Like that's why it's so good because if you're a fan of the movies, average movie enjoyer, Star Wars fan, and you read the books, like it feels like a movie. And it's very compelling. And like there are major issues, or at least issues with the Thrawn trilogy, and there are also things that like Plagueis does better. But I think that it's the best story. Like Thrawn is the most compelling villain. There's a reason why he's paraded back every decade. So yeah.
Yeah, like as an entry point for there being a Star Wars expanded universe, there's definitely an appeal that Zahn is able to bring from the movies that Lucino might not have been able to do quite as well.
Yeah.
So our next question comes.
So James Lucino was definitely writing in the 90s, so he's 75. So
yeah, well,
yeah.
Our next question comes from Justin.
He wrote some in the New Jedi Order as well.
Yeah, well, he originally wasn't even supposed to write in the NJO. He was supposed to be like the overseer for it, which is kind of interesting. But Justin says, I am curious as to what was in the storehouse that Falia didn't want getting out. Assuming Zahn didn't have an idea for it at the time, but it might have become the Kamas document.
Yeah.
When I finished The Last Command, the only thing I was thinking of, I want more, and honestly, the ending to that felt like the scene right before a confession scene in a romance novel. So Zahn was surprised that people put Luke and Mara together. He has only himself to blame.
I'm pretty sure it outright says, I think I had this in my note, I think it outright says in Vision of the Future that it, or Spectre of the Past, that it is the Kalmos document that he was worried about getting out. Doesn't he? Don't they outright say it when they're talking to Falia?
Yeah, it turns into that, but like I think it was mentioned.
He didn't know at the time.
Yeah, not in like the original Thrawn trilogy. Like it was definitely just a thing that Timothy Zahn set up as like, oh, I could return to this later, or this could just be kind of like the ring in in The Hobbit.
Yeah, I mean, he may have known that it was going to be something related to the species, but I doubt he kind of knew exactly what it was going to be. But it's always smart to throw future threads for yourself to have an excuse to write another book, basically.
Yeah, give yourself something to play with later.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Christopher, who asks, with how wildly out of chronological order the Bantam books were published, which characters or plot lines do you feel suffered because of the lack of planning and timelines crisscrossing? I personally feel that Zinj's death in his debut, the depiction of Pelian's Imperial Remnant before the Thrawn duology, and Mara's complete lack of presence in the Young Jedi Knight and Junior Jedi Knight novels are the biggest cases.
Those are good ones. Yeah, for me, it would be, I think Talon Card probably could have gotten a more interesting, more compelling handling. I think the biggest issue, though, is the lack of kind of an overarching threat other than the Empire. Especially where it's like not the Empire under Pelion. It's like this part of the Empire versus this version of the Empire versus this version of the Empire. I think maybe that could have been done in a more interesting way. But it also gets us lots of really fun kind of one-off stories, which I also do enjoy. So I don't know whether I would personally change it, but the Mara one is obvious, I think, because she's really not there for a long time.
Yeah.
And it could have been interesting to see kind of her and Luke more reasonably and slowly falling in love rather than we're going to drown, let's get married.
Yeah, there's a mix of like of just stuff, information not being available or them all being written at the same time that causes stuff to kind of overlap, or just authors that don't want to play with each other's stuff or don't want others to play with their stuff. Just like the Dark Empire, the Thrawn trilogy is the biggest example there. But there is a kind of connected question that Danklord asked about basically the New Jedi Order with this, saying, I think it would have been cool to see some of Luke's students trying to deal with things like the Black Fleet crisis or Grelling crisis during their early days when they're even less established than an NJO. And I think that is kind of the biggest thing that suffers is the New Jedi Order, where we know it's a thing that Luke has going on in the background, but outside of the Jedi Academy trilogy, it's just a thing that Luke references that he's abandoned for however long to go and do random shit. And most of those characters don't really come up in many places until NJO, partially because of how it was all written, partially because of some of those authors not really wanting to play with Streen very much for some reason. But
just rude.
Yeah, like seeing more involvement from some of those characters, or if it was developed now with the idea that like these expanded universe continuities are more of a thing that people expect to be connected, like you'd get with your Marvels or your current day Star Wars. I do think that would look fairly different. There'd be more exposure to some of those characters and more consistency with some of those characters.
Agreed. I think that's well said.
there anyone else, like maybe some of Luke's romantic partners beyond Mara as well? Like there'd be less competition there, and some of them might have been just not just like fridged after their initial appearance.
Yeah, that could have been good. But I mean, a lot of those, like Callista or not Callista, Gariel, for example, was or no, I can't remember. I guess wasn't wasn't Truce of Bakura written pretty early?
Yeah.
So like Gariel, like they could have picked up on her had they wanted to.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
they did pretty soon. Like Corellian Trilogy, as far as when it was written after Truce of Bakura,
mhm.
was quite soon. It was only 2 years or something.
Yeah, I think it was 93 to or 93 to 95 maybe.
Yeah. So it's maybe 94 even. So it like Gariel
Mhm.
gets introduced, she tells Luke she's not interested, and then she dies like right
Mhm.
after. And that
Yeah.
that does leave a lot of time in between that Gariel could have shown up though, had she ever left Bakura. But even the Corellian trilogy basically implies that they haven't really seen each other in 10 years
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
So it's not many
Yeah.
options there. But if it had been written more in chronological order, then that
Yeah,
might have gone
like
differently.
if they had written, a book 2 years after, then, Gariel could have been brought up without it. If you don't see someone for 2 years, they might still be single. If you haven't seen them for 15 years or 10 years and they're still single, it's like, okay, like has nothing changed in your life basically?
Yeah.
Or it's not even being single, it's just like if your life hasn't changed at all in 2 years, it's like okay, but if it hasn't changed in 10 years, it's like what's going on?
Yeah. So, anyways, more talking about Star Wars for us in our 30s now.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I also it's Corey's birthday today.
It is
Happy birthday,
Corey's
Corey.
birthday today.
Corey's 30 like I am. We're old and disgusting.
Yeah.
I gotta
Thanks.
warn you, once you turn 30, your injuries just stop healing.
Well, that's basically they slow
I
over
I,
your late 20s. I'm
I hurt
already
my
there.
back in the gym, and I think it's just like this forever.
Yeah, that's why I just don't go to the gym. I did buy myself a birthday present, an elliptical bike that
Hmm.
right over there, because I need to be a little bit more exercisey. So
Kelsey did the same thing for me. She bought me a Peloton. And then I'm like, where are you going? She's like, I'm going to go use the Peloton. What do you mean? Like, oh, you bought me a Peloton, did you? And that
yeah.
was also my joint birthday and Valentine's Day gift. I don't know.
I mean, I bought that for myself. It's not Dana pretending that she got it for me, but she has used it a lot as well.
Did she
So
get you anything?
she's making me a pie tomorrow.
That's my wife and I don't really usually do. I'm just joking. We don't usually do gifts. Like we
Yeah.
don't give each other anything. So
Uh,
hey yo,
let's
Jim,
see.
let him in. Let him in. I wonder
Riders
how much
on
it
the
would cost
Storm.
to license the Riders on the Storm Snoop Dogg Feet the Doors remix.
As the podcast theme song.
Yeah,
I wouldn't hate it, but I don't think
I wouldn't hate it at all.
which
I think the better question
NJO
is how
book.
long away could we? How long could we get away with it?
I mean, if Snoop Dogg can stream for 24 hours without his mic on, then
I think the best one for Riders on the Storm would be anything involving the Twin Suns Starfighter Squadron. I just feel like Riders on the Storm to me.
well, which NJO book should we get Snoop Dogg as a guest for?
Oh,
Dank Journey.
definitely one involving the Vornskers because they're the most
Mhm.
dog-like creatures.
Go Star by Star with Snoop Dogg. You heard it here first.
Yep.
Uh, our next question that we'll get to. This is actually one that I think we might have gotten to the on the Survivor's Quest and Vision of the Future episodes a little bit, but what do you guys think of the idea of Thrawn still being around in the form of a clone post Survivor's Quest? Maybe as a way to show that the Thrawn trilogy Thrawn and the Outbound Flight Thrawn were the same, as he could explain better his change from the seemingly good Thrawn to the corrupted by the Empire fascist Thrawn. Could have
So
provided
how
a
does
chance
that
for Jag
explain
to look
that?
at his
Like, there's
situation.
been is he suggesting that there's been two around the whole time, or?
Well, I think they're suggesting that like Thrawn could explain the change somehow, but I think it's just
Oh, okay.
I don't know
I
that.
think that's a little too meta.
Yeah, I don't think Thrawn would really get too much of it. And like the Zan kind of
Thrawn, why are you a
tries to
dick
do
now?
it in the Ascendancy trilogy, and I think both of our responses to it was like, nah, not landing for me.
Yeah.
Where the general is like, something changed in Thrawn after that battle, and nothing had actually changed in Thrawn after that battle. There wasn't anything special about it.
Yeah.
So
I think Thrawn's like he's like I didn't have my Snickers today.
Because Timothy Zahn has actually.
You're a real fascist when you don't eat your Snickers.
No one's themselves when they're hungry. Did we just solve Star Wars?
I think we just solved war.
Wow.
Someone call Putin quick!
Let's not joke about but like Timothy Zahn did like interviews before the reboot of how he'd love to write a book about like Ben Skywalker teaming up with a clone of Thrawn to solve something that only Thrawn could solve, and then the clone having to deal with the fact that he's not really Thrawn. So I feel like any future appearances of Thrawn weren't going to examine like, hey, you kind of sucked 10 years ago. It would have leaned more into the outbound flight. What do you mean I genocided a whole species because I couldn't understand their art? That wasn't me.
Yeah, that's kind of similar to like, that just sounds like one of those ideas that was just kind of thrown around. Like how George Lucas apparently had that idea for like an episode 7 video game where it's like Ben Skywalker does something. It's just like they're just throwing around names, or like he had he would have just taken what's her name from Legacy, Darth Talon, because she's a sexy red Twi'lek, like
character with Maul.
Like, yeah, because why not? Like,
sorry, George, but you killed Maul off twice.
Yeah.
Well, he got better.
Yeah.
So our next question that we'll get to comes from Matrix, who asks, instead of asking a basic question of Star Wars, I want to ask the big question. What inspired you guys to make a Star Wars themed book club podcast?
I think we pretty much had the idea right from the start.
Yeah.
Because we got along really well, and I think we both probably, every, I think 26, 27-year-old man, especially white men who think like just generally people want to listen to them, have the idea of starting a podcast. So we're both the same age. So I imagine that like biological urge that's like in your DNA sometimes hit us at the same time. We were probably streaming together or something.
Yeah, like in prior generations, people would talk about like settling down in their late 20s, having some kids. With our generation, that's like settling down and having a podcast.
Yeah.
So that's basically what we did. Like,
so we did the podcast no one's ever seen before, where it's slightly skinny guy and slightly fat guy start a podcast together and don't edit it that much. And
what people need, our opinions.
Yeah.
Like we started talking about like when we first met, we were just talking about like, hey, can I have a demo version of Thrawn's Revenge / Ascendancy? And
here
then
we fucking go. I know where this is going. Go ahead.
No, I'm not going to tell that part.
Okay.
I forgot about that. I gotten over it.
No, you fucking didn't.
I seriously, I had no idea where you were going with that until you finished. But I know I'm not even going to say it. Okay. But we went into like from there we started.
I forgot to credit him on the video that I put out, or I forgot to link to the mod and on the video, and he asked me twice, and I forgot both times.
But then we started talking about like YouTube channels we watched and just other Star Wars crap, and then we had like a 4-hour call. So we planned out the podcast right after that. So it was basically it was just a way to monetize these conversations we should have been having anyway.
We've not monetized this podcast.
Yeah, I've not made any. Other than a donation right now by him from Solo Alexis. So there you go.
Yeah, that's true. I think my biggest inspiration was the Star Wars Minute podcast. It's the only only Star Wars podcast I've ever listened to. And basically what they do, and I want to be on there. That's also the only I'd be on lots of podcasts, but that's like the one Star Wars podcast that like I would really want to be on. And what they do is they break down Star Wars minute by minute. So they'll have one episode dedicated to a minute of Star Wars. And it ends up being really interesting because the episodes aren't usually too long. Like they'll go, 20 or 30 minutes, or if it's something, bigger, but they have really interesting guests. And I was just thinking, I'd like to, it's cool to hear people talk about stuff they like. So I thought it'd be cool to do that with the books instead.
Yeah, like I was kind of looking for, I hadn't started a lore channel yet. I was only doing the gaming
Yeah,
stuff,
I always forget that.
and like when we started talking, I had started
Mhm.
Datapad by the time we started the podcast, but I was kind of looking for more of a reason to go back and read the books again.
Mhm.
So, because like it's useful for researching for videos and stuff. And I really struggle without having like exterior motivation for doing certain things. Not that I don't enjoy doing them for their own sake, just that it's hard for me to justify spending the
Mhm.
time on it. So like playing video
Yeah.
games, reading books that I'd like, even if I'd really love the book, it is a kind of thing that where I'd go, oh, it would be great if I had time for this. So it was for me kind of a way to make me actually do that.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Especially the more busy you get, it's hard to. It's
Yeah.
basically just justification. So yeah, I get that.
Uh so our next question comes from Garrett, who asks, I've been wondering how age affects Star Wars characters' combat skills and overall
It
skills.
doesn't. Next question.
Would Yoda have beaten or done better against Palpatine if he were 400 years younger, or someone like Dooku if he'd have been 43 instead of 83?
Um, Star Wars doesn't like. We follow the solos until they get in their 70s. We follow lots of characters as they get older. And aside from characters get better as they turn like to their 20s, I don't think there's any evidence that characters get any less
Yeah.
skilled as they get older. Um, yeah.
Yeah, like maybe Yoda, when he was on his deathbed in episode 5, wouldn't have
Yeah,
been quite
that's
as
right.
good, but like I think the we do have evidence because like the little duel in episode 4 compared to episode 3, where they're
Yeah, that's
but they're
true.
just out of practice, or Obi-Wan's just out of practice. So
Yeah.
yeah, beyond that, like Dooku at 83 was still considered like the best duelist in the galaxy. So I don't think he was really out of his prime yet.
Yeah, totally agree.
So our next question is from Seamus, who asks, if you could choose, what new stories in the Legends continuity would you want? For me, I would love a Sword of the Jedi as well. I think it'd be really interesting to see a prequel novel in NJO covering the Vong's early preparations for the invasion and Shimra/enemy's coup against Coriol. I've always been intrigued by the little information we get in NJO about Coriol and the Coriolists, and I think there's potential for a great novel about the topic. Anyway, have a great day and keep up the fantastic work.
Yeah, I would have liked. I don't know if I want to necessarily limit it to just any one thing, but I would have liked generally to see more kind of once stories are kind of set up. Like once you have the new Jedi Order, you have whatever else. I would have liked to see more stories kind of set in the pre-established conflicts or time periods, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, like a pre-invasion Vong thing could have been cool. A book set during Dark Empire, I would have really liked that. Yeah.
Yeah, a book set during Dark Empire to flesh out some of what's going on would be cool.
Mhm.
Well, the Dark Empire source book is really good for that, but something that's more narrative.
Yeah.
Uh, one thing that I do really wish we got is some explanation of how, like some series about the Confederacy rejoining the Galactic Alliance, because
Hmm.
they must at some point, and then they just don't.
Yeah. I guess that'll be probably it might maybe Andor will deal with that a bit in canon.
I mean, like the post end or the second Confederacy, the
Oh, sorry.
Corellian one.
Yeah, okay. I thought you meant the Confederacy of Independent Systems.
Yeah, because
Sorry.
they leave off Fate of the Jedi and they're still their own faction. Then you
Hmm.
get to Legacy and they're not anymore. So
Yeah, I would like to see just I would like Sword of the Jedi. I would have just liked to see kind of more of that as just generally.
yeah, I mean, something that is kind of depressing is that like the new Jedi Order has been destroyed like twice in each continuity. So far, we end with the Jedi Order just done. Like
Hmm.
Legacy, it ends with it completely collapsed again. There's
Hmm.
so many Jedi purges that happen.
Hmm.
So more rebuilding after Legacy would be cool as well.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Okay, so for our next question, Oscar wants to know, from the evidence that keeps piling up, it would seem that Disney Plus shows are perhaps all pointing towards some sort of Canon Thrawn Trilogy remake. So, should this be the case, would you guys prefer that the shows culminate in a crossover that's a limited series, like 6 or more episodes, with a medium-sized budget like the Mando or Boba, or would you prefer a 2 to 3 hour film with a very high budget like the sequels?
I don't know. Maybe a movie, I guess. I like if they can set the groundwork in TV shows, I think a movie would be cool. I just don't think that's necessarily reasonable
Yeah.
to expect.
I think between those choices, like a 6 episode series or a 2 to 3 hour movie, I'd probably rather have the movie because then
Mhm.
they don't have to do as much setup within different episodes because you end up with about as much relevant runtime
Yeah.
there. And if you can have a higher budget on it, why not?
Yeah, it's just there's stuff you can do in movies that they still can't really do in TV shows without the rest of the season suffering, just money wise.
Yeah. And like Marvel has already shown that at least Disney as a whole is willing to do more connections between shows building up to movies. The one limiting factor there is that you can't necessarily assume everyone watching the movie has seen the show. So
Yes,
while stuff can build up towards it,
that's a good
TV
point.
shows can be more reliant on the fact that okay, you already know what this is. Whereas, like especially with Star Wars movie, that's kind of the big blockbuster thing. They're expecting a lot of people to come in having no prior information. So let's
Hmm.
and it is nice seeing like a bunch of the different directors or writers kind of come in and have their own take on things, or getting people like Bryce Dallas Howard, who probably wouldn't have been tapped to direct a movie if they had been doing what their original
Hmm.
plan seemed to be of like movies all the time.
Yeah,
But with shows being what they've been doing, she's done a great job and has probably put herself up there as someone who will get to do a lot more in Star Wars, which is great.
yeah, totally agreed. Well said. I like the idea of testing them out in the shows first, and then
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's let Dave Filoni get a lot more practice with live action directing. He
yeah,
probably wasn't going to do a
definitely,
movie.
yeah, he definitely
Uh,
needs the time.
but our next question comes from Ashley, who says, "I recently binged the Clone Wars series on Disney Plus for the first time. Some's good, not so, some not so much, but it does have a lot of setup for what comes later.
Definitely true.
My two boys have not seen it yet and would like some suggestions on what episodes, arcs I could show them as an abridged version, so we can get into the Bad Batch and Rebels."
Ooh, I'm the wrong guy to ask for that. Your favorite, that's basically asking best Clone Wars arcs. There
Well,
is a
especially
lot you
setting
can.
up for Bad Batch and Rebels, not necessarily just like the best quality ones, but ones that
I don't
might be
think you
most
really
relevant
need to
to.
watch because it's tough. So like for Rebels, I guess the main thing would be like who Ahsoka is.
Yeah,
Because I don't think there is episodes like with the Syndulas, but I don't think they add a lot really.
yeah,
Like a lot of context to what's going on in Rebels. Like Hera's somebody who had a family who opposed the Empire. Is basically all you need to know.
yeah.
And you don't even really get that in Clone Wars. So I'd probably watch a few arcs about. Like I think the Ryloth arc would be a good one to watch, like the Siege of Ryloth, because that shows kind of early. What was I going to say? That just kind of shows early stuff with the Jedi, and I guess Ryloth is important as like just as a whole. Um, and yeah, I don't know.
Like season 7
Season
as a
7,
whole is
yeah,
kind of important there. Then I think there's the first appearances of like Echo
yeah,
might be good. Like his capture. I forget what exact arc it is, but that's
hmm
probably a good one to watch for because like Echo doesn't get enough
hmm
fleshing out in Bad Batch. So if you want to kind of give them an understanding of who he is, he's a more interesting character if you have his background and like how he gets to be where he
yeah,
is. Because you get the
yeah.
rescue in season 7, but
The whole arc of that group is good. I guess the thing I was trying to say too is this the Caesar Ryloth. I think that's the one that has Ahsoka kind of not listening to Anakin, right? And
mm,
I believe she ends up getting she ends up fucking up the mission. So that's a good one, kind of show how she was early on, and then you could watch something like I don't know,
the arc where she leaves the Jedi
where she's
Order.
expelled the Order.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be a good one. I guess that's a Coruscant bombing arc. So I think those would be good. There is honestly like a lot of the Clone Wars is kind of self-contained and skippable and provides more context to kind of the Clone Wars rather than what comes after.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I can't think of a whole lot else. And for the Bad Batch, it's really you only need to watch their 4 episodes. Really, you can watch a
Yeah.
bit more if you want to know more about Echo, but
You can throw in like the Onderon stuff if you want.
that's
Saw
true.
Gerrera,
I
because
forgot
Saw
about
Gerrera
that.
shows up in both shows after that as well.
Hmm.
But it's also not necessarily the most kid friendly, I guess. I mean, it's all pretty kid friendly, but like it's some of
Yeah,
the darker stuff with Saw.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, I think the season 7 is kind of the, if you want to
yeah.
keep it relatively limited, definitely season 7 because it
Yeah, I
matches
think
up better
season
with what's
seven's
going
a
on.
good point. And then if you want to go back further than that, watch the Ahsoka bits. And then if you want to kind of look at even more, I would just look at generally like there's some arcs that are kind of seen as being the best. Um, like I like the Mortis arc is one that's pretty fun.
Mhm.
Self-contained. There's lots of kind of little stuff like that. I like the Senate murders arc, but that's completely irrelevant to everything else.
Yeah, those are the ones that I think got like the most out of order.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. The Senate murders one are really messed up. There's a
the
few that I think are just awful too, like the Mon Calamari arc. I really don't like that one.
Mandalorian arc is probably good to watch for like Rebels, and then for uh the Mandalorian,
Hmm.
like any of the
Yep.
episodes with Satine there.
Yep.
The next question comes from Aaron, who says, "Do you think we'll ever get a full-fledged Clone Wars style animated series that features Luke, Han, and Leia in stories in post Endor? Seems like this, even more than live action, would be a great way to explore their years between the OT and the sequels, especially the story of Kylo's upbringing."
I don't think so. Um, I don't think so because I feel like just from a practical sense, they've kind of like we know the endpoint of those characters. Like, there's only so much story they can tell. I think they'd rather spend their time kind of with characters like the Bad Batch
Mhm.
or just others who like. There's lots of story left that they can tell. They can build towards something. So I don't think so. I think they'll probably kind of relegate that to novels, most likely.
Novels, and then if they want to do something that's like showy with it, it seems like that's the kind of thing, like stories about those characters that would get a little bit more prominence and done in live action with deep fakes or something.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it just seems, I don't know, the idea of having like a Luke, Han, and Leia animated show almost seems weird to me. I could see them being like background characters in a show about Kylo. Like I
Mm,
could see that being more of a thing rather than something focused on them. So the Kylo upbringing thing, I think, is the most likely way for that to happen.
mm.
But
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially when he's eventually revived. We all know it's going to happen. Come on.
we just, did you miss the scene at the end of Rise of Skywalker where it zooms in on his body? You get the inhale.
Yeah, the blinking light on his chest.
The Kylo Ren and Cad Bane buddy cop comedy.
We both should be dead. Then Darth Maul's legs as well.
That's something that Star Wars hasn't explained. For all that Darth Maul has been brought back, it's always the upper body. Where's his lower body at?
Yeah, yeah. Where's the Sith wiener hanging out?
Yeah, where's the animated show where it's General Grievous's upper body put on Darth Maul's legs? Through my Sith magic.
And your Zabrak testicles.
Next question comes from Adam, who says, "Dark greetings. Has there ever been any explanation as to why Lucasfilm has chosen not to bring in some of the older Legends authors like Lucino or Denning? I can understand wanting to add new blood into the franchise, and I love Claudia Gray's work, but it feels like Lucasfilm is trying to distance themselves from its previous writers altogether."
Um, I think there's maybe a few things. Um, I think it's possible. One thing is money.
Yeah.
Where like Denning, for example, does a lot of writing for Halo. Um, and like I imagine he probably and like Kevin J Anderson, I believe, writes a lot of his own fantasy.
Yeah.
So like they're at the point where they don't. Not to say that the other authors need Star Wars to write. Like to be honest, I know nothing about their careers, so I'm not going to say that. But like I imagine that they probably charge a lot. And it does seem like they do kind of want a new brain trust. I don't know why they want a new brain trust, but it seems like they do.
Yeah, like, I think part of it's definitely money. I don't think there's like a fundamental opposition to working with them. Like we still
Yeah.
see the occasional book by Zahn and by Lucino, but a lot of them are also older. So trying to
Hmm.
establish new name recognition with new authors is probably
That's a
simply
good point as well.
fun.
Yeah.
Uh, but like, I'm not sure how much of the author selection comes from Lucasfilm versus coming from Del Rey.
Hmm.
Because like the Halo books are published by Del Rey as well, so like they've clearly got an ongoing relationship with Troy Denning.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's impossible that we'd get another book out of Troy Denning or Stackpole, not Alston. Um,
Yeah. Sadly. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I guess.
yeah. And related to that, Lords of Arnor asks, with you guys finally getting the NJO, I was wondering why Timothy Zahn didn't write a book for the NJO. Was there some
Hmm.
sort of contract issue? Was Zahn approached and he didn't want to do it? Or is Zahn annoyed with the way the invasion is going to go?
I don't know. I feel like I read an article once that made Zahn seem a little unhappy with kind of Del Rey after the buyout. Where like for one, he I guess he seemed. I'll have to read it because it was kind of. I mentioned it last episode too, and it was about him kind of trying to set up stuff for NJO in the Thrawn duology. I don't really know why though. He may just not have been interested.
Yeah, like, especially with him having written the setup, like,
Hmm.
he. I don't think there was necessarily an issue with him opposing the direction of the invasion arc in general.
Hmm.
It might have just been the partially a budgetary thing as well, but with him having just done the setup and vision in the future, they only had so many
Hmm.
books that you can reasonably do, and like you want to have a mix of some of the authors that have already done it and some new names. Uh, I'd have to look into it more to know or
Yeah.
to see, even to try to read between the lines of whether
Yeah. Does
there
seem
was
like a
something else
shame
going
though.
on there.
I've wondered
Because
that before
yeah, because
myself.
like Lucino wasn't even supposed to be writing any books for it himself. Like he
Hmm.
was kind of supposed to take over for Del Rey as the arbiter of, or kind of like the overseer of what is Star Wars canon going to look like.
Hmm.
And it's also possible that Zan was less inclined to be part of a bigger collaborative
Yeah.
project like that,
Yeah.
because he was already with the Thrawn trilogy kind of not thrilled with having to work within the confines of Star Wars in general,
Hmm.
which she kind of got over a little bit. But when it's something that would be so directed by what other people are doing, uh, I think the bigger question there is like, why didn't they ask Kevin J. Anderson? Was it just,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
no?
good question. Who knows?
Did James Lucino and Timothy Zahn get in like a fist fight? Maybe. I'm not saying they did. I'm not saying they didn't.
Yeah, could have
But
happened.
inquiring minds. Timothy wants to know, I've often wondered why so many seemingly different ships fall under the MCA banner. Just looking at the Home One and the Liberty, these seem to me like fundamentally different ships. I know the Mon Calamari ships are supposed to be modular and configurable, but it seems like these are divergent enough from one another to be distinct models. So I was wondering if you knew what's common between them that isn't shared with, say, the MC90. Then I was wondering if the Viscount Mediator and Heavy Carrier had model numbers that were known.
Well, the lore reason is that each ship is supposed to be different because they're like repurposed vessels. So it's like, I know in canon there are like cities that were brought into space, but in Legends I'm pretty sure they're all
Cruise liners and
repurposed
stuff.
cruise liners. Yeah. So I imagine like they're just different types of ships that were brought up to military spec through
Yeah.
different equipment. So it's like, oh, this is cruise liner type A. From an out of universe perspective, um, that wasn't always the case, and I don't know kind of why. I imagine it was just kind of made the case for simplicity's sake.
Yeah, like I think if you want to try to do an in-universe rationalization of it, the MC-80 is like a catch-all term for the
It's just
capital
like
ship
yeah,
size converted ones. Then
that meet
MC-80B
a
was
certain
like,
standard
yeah.
of
Then MC-80B was like the first attempt at a military version that's still kind of within
yeah.
similar ranges. Then the MC-90 is like true dedicated warship that's going a step beyond, with like attempt to involve Mon Cal crews. So I think that's kind of the way I look at it.
And it's also been, I believe it's also been stated specifically that the Viscount and others don't have a number designation. So
my ability to scroll through this Google Doc is broken for some reason.
Get wrecked.
But Khalil is asking, I've often wondered why some no, that was Khalil. I have messed up the pasting somehow. So I've missed either Khalil's or Timothy's question. I am sorry. I will try to get that later if we can. We might not have time though.
Oh, don't worry. Charlie accidentally put the thing an hour late. So.
Oh, sweet.
And it seems like he went to sleep because he's not answering my messages.
So I'm not sure whether we just answered Timothy's or Khalil's question, but I'll try to get to the other email in a minute. We'll go to Michael's question next, who asks, when is merch happening? If you could pick a Legends character to get their own solo book, who would they want to see get one? And who would you want as your wingman if you were a fighter pilot? And what ship would you fly? That last one's easy. I don't know about the ship part, but we both pick Oral. Anyone who says
no, Oral.
is...
If I were in a bar and I needed a wingman.
Oh.
I can't take anyone other than Luke. I think.
No, you don't want that.
Because you're gonna die.
Yeah, who has the highest fucking attrition rate of wingmen in the entire series?
That's a good point.
Everyone just dies as soon as they're Luke's wingman. Dak doesn't even get to space.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. Okay, so yeah, I'll take. But I mean, for realistically though, without being nerfed by being Luke's wingmate, who do you think is the best pilot? I'm sorry, it's gotta be Force sensitive. Like,
I don't know. I think Wedge is still better than Corrin.
I don't know.
Jaina's easy.
Yeah.
Her wingmen survive most of the time. Like, Twin Suns has a relatively low attrition rate, even in the Vong War.
Yeah.
Or not Twin Suns, that's Luke's.
Well, she's in Twin Suns.
Oh yeah, she takes over it. Yeah. She takes over it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because it's funny because there's twins in it and the whole. Yeah.
Well, Jason wasn't it.
Wasn't he in Twin Suns for a while?
He was in, I guess, yeah, it changes a lot.
Because there aren't twins like an affront to Vong. Like, don't the Vong hate twins or something? Or like they've got the myth of the twins.
Yeah.
Don't they? Twin deities or whatever. But
yeah. Because like twins aren't common for Vong. Like, what is this shit? There's two pairs of twins?
Yeah.
How are we supposed to win a war against four people?
We're fucked.
So should people have taken Luke saying he feels like he can take on the whole Empire by himself as a threat?
Yeah. You really want to fly with me? Because I'm feeling pretty good about flying alone today. Okay.
For the fighter type, I mean A-Wing, because my squadron's time is really was the best one to fly.
Yeah, I mean it's the most fun to fly, but the A-Wing's not even meta anymore. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, is anything meta right now?
My kid just woke up. Can you handle this for a second?
No, I can't. But go anyways.
Okay.
Okay, so the question there, the ship question was from Timothy. So Khalil's question was, what you hope for in the new season of Bad Batch and in Kenobi? I hope to see more of the secret cloning facility in the Bad Batch. I also hope another character arc for Crosshair and one for Echo. Last, I hope to see Obi-Wan and Anakin duel along with Qui-Gon talking to Obi-Wan. I think most of the Bad Batch stuff there, you're probably safe on. You're probably going to get most, if not all, of that. They're definitely setting up what we assume to be Mount Tantus as a big thing, and then it'd be hard not to get more for Crosshair and Echo. Echo got so little, and then Crosshair is clearly still the big thing that they're trying to deal with. I'm a little bit disappointed that they didn't get to more of a conclusion with him in season 1. see what happens there. I don't know if we're actually going to get a fight with Obi-Wan and Anakin. I feel like the build up is definitely there for that, but whether that makes the most sense for what's going to happen, I don't know, because I feel like most of the Anakin stuff is either going to be flashbacks or seeing what a life or the life of Vader is like right now, and that like the Inquisitors are kind of there for the Obi-Wan duel. I don't know if the Obi-Wan Anakin confrontation is going to happen again. Like maybe they will just because they have both of them, and why not? But I kind of hope it doesn't happen. But I feel like it's kind of like the whole Mace Windu returning conversation we had, where if it does happen, then I'll probably enjoy it. But I hope for my own sake that I don't have to end up enjoying it.
What's that?
Khalil's question was about what you want to see happening in the Bad Batch or Obi-Wan, if there's
Okay.
maybe a fight with Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Seems like at this point there is going to be. I was kind of hoping there wouldn't be.
Yeah.
It seems like, I don't know, do you think Obi-Wan has to appear to die? Like,
I don't know. I just hope it doesn't happen. I'd rather leave it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So for Michael's two other questions there, if you could pick a Legends character to get their own solo book, who do you want to see get one?
Who would I don't necessarily like the Wedge solo book. I know he's in a lot of them, but
yeah,
it seems like in the Rogue Squadron books, he starts off often as like the main villain, or sorry, the main hero, and then kind of usually it will transfer to Corrin or somebody else. I'd kind of like to see maybe older Wedge like planning a military operation or something that he's not flying in and him having to deal with that.
I mean that's kind of
interesting.
what Rebel Stand and Rebel Dream are.
Yeah, fair enough. No, that's a good point.
We do get a good amount
I was
of
just
Wedge
thinking of like an
Legacy
I
Force
Jedi
too.
type of book.
Yeah.
But yeah, who else? I don't know. Who's yours?
We kind of get a lot of the ones that I would have wanted. Like we get a Mara book, we get a Jason book in Trader. We get I Jedi for Corrin.
Yeah.
I think I'm maybe like a Talon card book, like a dedicated Talon card
good.
book would be my number one answer there.
Yeah, that's a really good call.
And maybe one of the bugs from Dark Nest. They deserved a bit more explanation or exploration.
Yeah, agreed.
Find out what Lobaka was doing for the 2 years that he was banned by Lucasfilm Publishing.
Just jerking off with his robot computer in his brain.
And as far as when merch is happening, I mean, maybe shirt or something when there's better like actual branding for the show. Right now, there's no real branding or logo or anything for the podcast.
Yeah, that's definitely something we could do. If y'all buy it,
I'd buy one.
Lord, yeah, I'd buy one.
I'd wear one on the show.
Yeah.
All right, so we have circled back around to a second question from Joel, who asks, do you think the Legend expanded universe, especially post-Endor, becomes more and more inaccessible post-Bantam era, especially once you get to the Fate of the Jedi and Legacy of the Force stuff, that there are fewer jumping on points? And do you think that when all is said and done, the Mandoverse may be in a weird way what the Bantam era could have looked like if they had more long-term planning and overarching story behind it?
I don't necessarily know if I see the Mandoverse connection there, but yeah, I mean, it definitely is harder to jump in when every book for a year is like part of a 11 book series or whatever. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like I think they were probably trying to get back to something that required a little less background when they were going to go with Sword of the Jedi, because like Crucible was almost tying up a lot of the ends of the plot lines and just kind of like starting fresh with Jaina as this new main protagonist and going into solving whatever the next issues are going to be with like her, Alana, and still have all those characters around, but less of the built up 20 years of background lore of like, okay, this is kind of Jason's story for a long time. Uh,
Yeah.
which obviously it's not Jason's story in Fate of the Jedi, but that's still a culmination of a lot of those characters, a lot of those plot lines dealing with the fallout of like Jason's death. Because Jason dies at the end of Legacy of the Force, and then Fate of the Jedi is kind of still dealing with a lot of that, and like Luke
Mm-hmm.
looking into Jason's fall with Ben. So I think that was kind of, they were almost looking to press a reset button there, but we'll never
Mm-hmm.
know because we're never going to read those books. I do agree.
Yeah. Crucible's also funny because the main villains are like those big-headed aliens, the Calamari, and
Yeah.
it's just like they're straight out of like Looney Tunes or something.
Yeah, there were a few questions about like Riptide and Crosscurrent, which I don't feel equipped to answer right now, but we'll
Yeah, no,
definitely
me
get
neither.
to those books and do bigger
Yep.
explorations of like
Hmm.
Crucible, Riptide, Crosscurrent, which are all three pretty weird. They're not directly
Yeah,
connected,
I
but
remember
they're
like
very weird.
Han almost gets force powers in Crucible for a while.
Yeah, it's very wacky books. All the clones and Crosscurrent and Riptide, like shit gets off the rails for a little bit.
Yeah.
All the books around Fate of the Jedi end up like Fate of the Jedi itself. Like Abeloth is a whole thing.
Hmm. They gotta they end with like wanting to find the Mortis
Yeah,
system, which is like kind of epic, but kind of weird.
yeah. So there's also from Joel. Do you think the post-Endor era of Legends got more cynical post-Bantam, especially with how many destructive wars, popular character demises, and of course the Empire being allowed back into power?
Um, don't really feel like it was cynical necessarily. No, I don't think cynical is the right word. I just think I think maybe there's a bit of overall movement to kind of establish a new enemy, which is
Yeah,
definitely what they did with Del Rey. But like, I don't think it's cynical because it's the Empire because there's still wars even after that. It's just there's different enemies.
yeah. Like I think the Empire rehabilitation stuff is the closest you get to cynical there, but the main change is that they were kind of looking for more stakes than existed and more of a serial element to it. So like
Hmm.
with a lot of the Bantam stuff, there was the fact that yes, you could jump in at any point, but there's also kind of the assumption that by the end of the book, nothing's going to have changed. That's kind of the trade-off that you get. Like, sure, there's a
Hmm.
few characters they'd introduced, but fundamentally, the galaxy looks very similar at the start and end of any of those trilogies or book series. Yeah, Talon Card exists now, but even with them, it's just these are the characters that were introduced in either X Wing or the Thrawn trilogy, so they get to stick around. If they weren't introduced in that, good luck showing up anywhere else.
Hmm. Yeah.
And there are definitely, I think that is one of the things that might have kept Zen from wanting to be part of NJO because he definitely has said he prefers the other form, like the lighter, everything works out in the end and everything does kind of go back to how it was. And
Yeah.
he was definitely opposed to like killing Chewbacca.
Killing
He
Chewbacca.
said
Yeah.
almost direct criticism of NJO this way. So it's probably not a period he was keen to be involved in.
Yeah. No, I totally. Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of had forgotten that quote. It just sucks because it feels like we could have gotten like Zahn's characters to get a bit more action, but whatever. And plus, I think Zahn is the best at making new characters as well.
Yeah.
Um, like I guess one crit. Well, I don't come out of the NJ. Well, I don't know. I guess that's maybe an unfair critic. I was gonna say I don't come out of the NJO with a lot of new favorite characters, but I guess there are new Jedi and stuff who are introduced.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters that were
I
in
guess
other places
Jason
that
and the
kind
kids
of
also get a lot of
yeah,
more play. Yeah.
like the Mercury Strike team, other than like um the ones who die and the Barabels.
Hmm.
Yet, well, Tessar even comes out being a relatively decent scale character, and there's characters like Silgal who've only shown up in relatively limited capacity before, who become
Hmm.
kind of front and center. Kent Hamner shows up a
Yep.
lot more. It's a lot of side characters that other authors wouldn't have played with that
Hmm.
now kind of get brought in and are able to be used throughout Dark Nest and Legacy of the Force, Fate of the Jedi. So
Yeah. No,
it's
agreed.
it is kind of the first place that characters who aren't Zans get brought in more, or aren't Zans, Alstons, or Stackbolts get brought in for wider use.
Except for maybe Kip Durin, but I guess even he's only really mentioned rather than used. But yeah, good point.
Yeah, Kip Durin really only comes up in other stuff to say, hey, didn't the Jedi Academy
Yeah,
trilogy have some weird shit in it? Also,
yeah,
what about that kid who genocided the planet?
yeah.
So,
No, you're right. All right. Do we have any more questions?
no, those are the email questions. So thanks to everyone who sent those in. Are there any? Maybe we can take a
Let's
couple
see.
from chat.
We'll give
If
chat a
there are
few
any.
minutes if you guys want to get any in. But what besides for? Are you looking forward more to? Besides for NJO, I guess is there one book or series you're really looking forward to?
I'm most interested in getting to the stuff that I either haven't read in a long time, haven't read at all, or is named Traitor. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
how about
fair
you?
enough.
Are there any books that are really standing out for you?
Probably Legacy as a whole, because I really
Mhm.
like Legacy of the Force, and I guess I'm just looking forward to a reread.
Yeah.
Um, I'm looking forward to the Rogue Squadron comics as well. Yeah, I guess those would probably be my main ones.
Yeah, like we talked about Scourge last week, and that's one that like I've never read it, so I'm kind of interested to
Hmm.
see
Hmm.
how good it is. And we actually got a few comments on that saying like Scourge was actually pretty awesome. So I'm like I don't think I got a single comment saying yeah, Scourge was shit. So do you also want to see if there's any
Yep,
reviews that you
I'm
want to pull up?
I'm doing that right now.
But the Old Republic ones are going to be an interesting one too, because like I haven't really read like the Revan books, and I've heard not great things about them.
Hmm.
So we'll see what that ends up looking like.
Yeah, I kind of had wished I had read the Revan podcast the other day when I was like doing a video on Revan, and it was like just a whole lot of shit I couldn't talk about because I hadn't read it. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean Tor is a big mess for that as well.
yeah, and I just like my problem is I don't like Tor.
Yeah,
Um, like I can't get into it. I wish I could, but I can't. Part of it is like honestly a big part of it's just the art style for me.
yeah. Are you looking more forward to Legacy of the Force than NJO and Fate of the Jedi? Like of the and I guess Dark Nest we'll throw in there. Like which of those four? What's kind of your hierarchy on what you're looking forward to most?
um, I said excluding NJO when I said which I think I'm probably looking forward to NJO the most. Then Legacy, then Fate, and then Swarm War is a pretty big dip. But
Yeah,
you know,
probably mostly.
yeah, you said you. I really like Fate of the Jedi as well, though. So yeah, I don't know. They should all be pretty interesting.
So Fate of the Jedi, I think I was reading mostly in class, like in university. So I don't have the most complete memory of it. And I do remember most of that class, so I think it's
One thing that's nice about Fate of the Jedi is it's unabridged audiobook. So I can just
Mhm.
listen to the audiobooks for that one, which
There you
for
go.
me, like I'm pretty busy, so that makes things just kind of a lot easier for me. Like it really because it's hard to sit down and like when and doing nothing else for 6-10 hours, however long. I guess not 10 hours, but six
Yeah.
hours. But um, with an audiobook, you can do it while you're at the gym or when you're driving or whatever else. So
Let's see. The chat first question from Obsidian or from Shadow has one above there. Yeah, so Shadow asks, "What Legends plot hole can you think of that you want or plot hole you can think of do you most wish was or will be filled?"
sorry, plot hole for canon.
Which Legends plot
Oh,
hole do you
legend.
most wish was or will be filled?
Hmm. Can you think of any?
I'm not usually too concerned about plot holes. Like I think the how does Corellia rejoin the Galactic Alliance is kind of the biggest question I have.
Hmm.
But normally it kind of depends on how you define plot hole, I guess. because I don't think there's any huge outstanding questions of like how did this thing that obviously should have been some other way stands out for me from Legends.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any plot. Like for me, the plot holes that I think of more than anything else would just be like um, things not being addressed necessarily, or characters kind of disappearing. Like where's Kyle Katarn during the Usual
Yeah.
Wrong War, like things like that. But I can't think of. I mean, obviously there are plot holes, especially in the early books, but none of them really stand out as bothering me, to be honest.
Yeah. Obsidian asks, which era is more interesting to you, pre-Empire or after Return of the Jedi? For me, that's easily after Return of the Jedi. I don't.
Yeah,
There's some books like MedStar and everything that I do really love, but as a period, I like Post Endor so much more.
yeah, me too. And I've always been like that. Like even when I started reading as a kid, because you want to know like what happened after the movies. So it's like the idea when I was starting out that like there are books that have all my favorite characters that I don't know the story of is just was always very exciting, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The next question comes from May, who asks, how would fans have reacted to the story of the Disney canon post Return of the Jedi stories had they been published in book form in the 90s? So I assume this is about specifically the sequel trilogy rather than necessarily being about the like books like Alphabet Squadron.
I thought of one plot hole.
What's that?
Um, the fact that the Empire names their ships such like heinous names, like Corruptor.
Are we
It's
the
like
baddies?
this is the Eviscerator. This is the Genocider.
This
It's like this is the Oppressor.
is the
Um,
evil flagship or factioner.
I would have liked somebody just to mention that. But
Yeah.
regarding it's just I don't think I can't. I've got no comparison point for if something like that would have happened. I think fan reaction would have still been kind of negative
I think we do
because
have a good comparison point on that though.
Chewie.
No, we have Dark Empire. It's like Rise of Skywalker is sitting right there.
Yes, but there's one big difference.
That.
The main three characters of the original trilogy weren't killed off in Dark Empire.
Is
I
that a big
think,
factor?
yeah, I think that's pretty big. I think that's like, I think Luke Skywalker dying was like one thing that people had a big issue with, and
I think
I,
it's a combination of Dark Empire plus Chewie dying, where I think both of them over time have become things that, like, pretty much everything in Star Wars that people have gotten more okay with. Where there's still people who really love it, still people who really hate it.
yeah, I just mean react. I guess I'm talking about like initial reaction. I think if a trilogy of novels had killed off
Yeah.
Han, Luke, and Leia in that order, I think people would have been very, very unhappy.
But if people had done Luke, Leia, then Han,
It would have been fine. It'd be like Luke, Leia, Han plus Jason.
like ultimately the initial reaction to almost anything Star Wars is negative, pretty much
That's why
without
Mandalorian was so
fail.
nice.
Yeah. Like episode 5 had a lot of negative reactions at first, even.
You know, I don't think that's true. I don't think The Force Awakens, like there were people like The Force Awakens people definitely had complaints about it, but I still think that movie was pretty well received. Like
Generally,
that
yes, but it was well received with the caveat of like, hey, this is very episode 4. It was like a very safe, well received. So it's
yeah. But like that was a movie where like I felt like there was the biggest disconnect between like what people who care way too much about Star Wars on Twitter thought versus like what the average person thinks. Where like that was a movie where like if I talked to all my buddies or I talked to like my dad about the movie, they were like, "Yeah, this is sick." But like with the
see.
Last Jedi, that's when like when I talk if I talked to my friends about the Last Jedi, a lot of them thought it was dumb.
Well, this
And
was like I wasn't very connected to the Star Wars fan base going into uh Force Awakens. Like I was kind of not out on Star Wars, but I wasn't anywhere near where I am now or where I'd been in engaging with Star Wars media like 4 years before.
Mhm.
And I didn't like The Force Awakens very much. None of my friends liked The Force Awakens very much, but we all liked The Last Jedi more. And
Yeah, I definitely didn't have that experience, but I mean that's just different experience. So
yeah. But yeah, there
I
are a
saw
few
The Force
questions about.
Awakens probably 5 times in theaters, just like because my friends would want to go see it
I
or
saw
see it a
like
second time.
I did see it initially on like a DVD, or not a DVD trip, on like a pirated. I mean, a
Cam
totally
version.
legitimate, totally
Totally.
legitimate.
Yeah, I bought it from this dude. Totally legitimate. Camera in the movie theater. Totally legitimate. No worries.
From George Lucas himself.
Yeah.
He shared it with me.
Yeah.
Uh, but there are a few questions in chat about like reading specific books, but again, kind of the answer there is just
You know what?
we'll
Rogue
get
One
to it.
was also received well.
Yeah.
And I think Rogue One, like, Star Wars was unbelievably hype in 2015. Like, people don't realize how much money The Force Awakens made in North America. It's insane. Um, Domestic box office lists. I don't know. Like, The Force Awakens is still one. Now, I will say there's a major caveat that's unadjusted. It's The Force Awakens earned more money in North America than Avengers Endgame, which is insanity. Like,
Yeah.
people, like, that movie was like a was like a cultural, like, it was like a big reset. It was exactly what Star Wars needed. Even adjusted, which is fairly insane. The Empire, or The Force Awakens, is still number 4, and that's behind Star Wars, ET, Titanic,
Yeah.
and I imagine there are a few others that like aren't on the list I'm looking at because they're so old. But like, that's crazy, and like the boon of that was so insane that Rogue One earned what, like 1 point, like Rogue One earned over $1 billion in the box office, which
Yeah.
is insane.
I think the proportional fall off for the sequel trilogy, the prequels, and the original trilogy are all within a few percentage points of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
it
I've
stays
heard
pretty
that too.
consistent. Because I did the math on that before, because someone was trying to point out the difference as being so much bigger, just because they were comparing the raw numbers rather than the actual
Mm-hmm.
percentages. Like it's a very, if you want to argue against the sequel trilogy or whatever, just don't use that argument, because it doesn't, the math doesn't support it. There are other
Mm-hmm.
reasons to criticize the sequel trilogy, but that one is just mathematically false.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Also,
kind
just to,
of,
sorry, to cover my own bases, I will note that when you adjust for ticket price inflation, The Force Awakens does drop a little bit as well. But yeah, I just want to mention, because that's where Gone with the Wind comes in, because tickets were like a nickel.
it is kind of interesting to think about, like, how different would Star Wars look currently if they had stuck with the movie direction rather than the show direction, and how much that has to
Mm.
do with Solo not doing fantastic. Uh,
Yeah, I really think
who
they made the right
knows?
idea personally. I made the right choice
Yeah.
personally.
Like I've always been kind of skeptical of the idea that like it was all movies all the time and then Solo doing slightly subpar
Yeah.
killed it. I think maybe that factored in a bit, but like they already had some experience with things working out a little bit better with Marvel. They were moving in that direction with Marvel, and
I think that the boon that Rogue One got is more significant. Like the boon that Rogue One got from The Force Awakens being well loved is more significant than the drop off that Solo
yeah,
got, because I think Solo's main issue is that it's just not a very interesting premise.
yeah,
Like I wasn't that interested to see Solo. And I also think the movie itself, like, there's a lot of things I think that come together to make Solo not very like palpable. Is that the word? Palatable. I don't know. Like,
Palpatine.
it's it's a good movie, but it's like it's filmed dark. It's like it's not doesn't have the kind of the sense. Like, I don't think it's got necessarily the big sense of grand adventure like most Star Wars movies do. Um, and yeah, I just don't think most people care about Han Solo's early life.
Yeah, like I enjoy Solo quite a bit for like other reasons of like just Woody Harrelson's in it. It's a big factor, and
Mm-hmm.
uh yeah, but
I never get the urge to watch Solo. I guess.
yeah. It would be nice to start seeing Star Wars movies again, but I think like Marvel is kind of the proof that Disney understands that both can work. So I don't think it was like all movies all the time
Mm-hmm.
and then Solo was like pump the brakes on that. Like there were definitely some production issues with Solo and
Yes.
with other projects that kind of gummed up the works a bit there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good point. I feel like there's something. Maybe some people just, maybe I'm biased because I am such a Star Wars fan, but I do feel like there's something kind of special about like Star Wars movies. No, I am being biased. For me personally, there's something special about Star Wars movies. Like it's such a spectacle. Like the crawl, the music, everything. And I think that, and just going to the movie theater in general, maybe this is just a movie thing overall. Like it's just so exciting and so fun, and like the scale of it all. And yeah, I think that's. I just hope we don't kind of run out of the movies.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's still a few that we can be reasonably sure are in production, like the Rogue Squadron movie is still coming.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to believe that Taika's movie isn't coming.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a few other rumors of some like other movies that have been in production. It's just one of the things with it is just that there have been so many movies that got announced so early when it's not kind
Mm-hmm.
of the same situation as the Marvel stuff where they do have like a set goal going in, where Star Wars is more like, oh, we could do a movie on this. It's not the same. It's not directly comparable. So there's less reliance on one project working and the other not.
Mm-hmm.
Because like eventually there's going to be a Marvel movie about Iron Man. Eventually there's going to be a Marvel movie about Captain America. That's going to happen if Marvel exists as a franchise. But there's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily going to, and like the director might change super early in production there. It's just with Star Wars, we got the announcement of like 47 movies, like the day
Yeah.
that someone had the idea to make a movie. And it has led to the justified feeling of like, okay, why does all this Star Wars shit just keep failing? And it's all just announced so goddamn early. Like
Yeah.
we're kind of seeing that with Eclipse now. Uh,
Yeah, totally. And it also leads to a feeling where like, yeah, when they announce Star Wars Episode 7, you know what's going to happen. So it's like you're excited about that the moment you hear it's announced. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Or like, but with these new movies, it's like, okay, is announced Star Wars movie number 20 gonna happen? It's like the Boba Fett movie was rumored a million times. There's these other movies that kind of are announced and disappear. I don't know. It's like I just hope that they really nail whatever comes next.
yeah,
Like I think it needs to be a movie that appeals not only to Star Wars fans, which I think was was Solo's problem a little bit. Like even when you like people compare Solo to something like a Marvel movie, and like that's a bad comparison because Spider-Man is still Spider-Man. Like people aren't watching it because it's Spider-Man, at least only watching because it's MCU Spider-Man. It's because it's Spider-Man. Everyone knows who the
yeah.
character is. Um, so I hope even if they do go something like Old Republic or something else that appeals more to Star Wars fans, I hope they do a good job of just kind of bringing the audience in.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think even on that, like the idea in 2001 that like people would watch an Iron Man movie would probably be kind of ridiculous. Like Iron Man was
mhm.
not a huge name in superheroes, really.
Yeah,
Like
no,
for people
that's
who
fair.
were already Marvel fans, sure, but it was Batman, Spider-Man, like Superman. I
Hmm.
I could be wrong on that, but I don't think Iron Man was that much of a household name.
Yeah, I think
That
that's
it
fair.
and like Robert Downey Jr. basically saved the
Yeah.
preemptively saved the MCU on that, I think.
Hmm.
But for another question, I'm sorry everyone, I'm kind of skipping over on the who would win, my dad or your dad in a fight kind of questions. I don't think we have much interesting to say on 1v1 fights. But
Yeah.
there's a question here. Is there a lightsaber battle that sticks out from any of the books, either ones we've covered or ones we haven't, as your favorite?
Hmm. That's a really good question. Um Lightsaber battle that sticks out. Honestly, the one where Darth Bane takes
Yeah,
on those Jedi is good, even though they've got the
the one on
Authorian.
Tython.
Yeah, where the Authorians buffing his squad.
Yeah, that one sticks out to me as well. The Jaina and Jason fight in
Yeah,
Invincible.
yeah.
Uh,
The one where Luke takes on all of the
Slayers.
yeah, the Slayers is really good. Isn't it Luke, Jaina, and Jason? Maybe.
Yeah, like Luke is fighting like 14 of the Jedi killing Slayers, which are like
Yeah,
bred from Jedi. There's a lot of weird shit there.
yeah,
Uh, well, Jaina is and Jason are each kind of like struggling for other ones. Then Jason just goes and duels a Nimi
yeah.
and kind of becomes one with the Force.
Yeah.
There's
I don't
some
think of
cool
any
moments in
others.
that.
Yeah. I think the the one where Mara dies is pretty good. And Luke and Leia versus Alima Rar and Lumaya is pretty good. I'm trying to think of other ones, like some of the earlier ones, maybe. Like the any Bantam era ones that really stick out.
There aren't that many lightsaber
Yeah,
battles
there
in
aren't
books
that
we've
many.
covered so far. It's really just like the Sabayoth showdown.
Leia versus what's his name?
Beldorian.
Beldorian, yeah.
Yep, there we go. There's not really many lightsaber battles so far. There's going to be more of them coming up, but
Corran Horn's father versus that Dark Jedi, or grandfather? Yeah, grandfather versus the Dark Jedi.
The Game of Thrones style one.
Yeah.
We do get Luke and Corran taking on the Jinsari.
I don't really like that one very much.
Yeah, iJedi doesn't have the best lightsaber battling, but
I'm trying to think if there's any others that I really liked. I guess some of the stuff from Young Jedi Knights, like when they're in the Shadow Academy, is okay, but
yeah.
I can't really think of a whole bunch.
I think when we get to some of the other Clone Wars ones, there will be a bit more there too, because we haven't really done any Clone Wars books other than MedStar and Revenge of the Sith, which Revenge of the Sith novelization has some pretty good lightsaber fights, just in how it examines what the people are doing, or their mental state. But yeah. I think, though, that is about all the time we have for now, because we've gone on for quite some time, but we are going to be doing some drunk streaming of, I think, Mario Party. I'm not sure what we're
I believe so. Yep.
So that'll be in about 20 to 30 minutes. We're going to go get ready for that. Is he dead? Well, we'll find out.
He might be.
But yeah, so thank you everyone for all your support in getting to these 99 episodes. We will be starting episode 100 in the 100s off with Vector Prime next week with our good friend Ilkin coming in to talk about a book that he's wanted to talk about for basically since he came on last time.
Yeah.
So exciting to get into that. Anything cool coming up for you?
We'll have episode 1 of the Halo show to talk about. Actually, no, it'll be coming out. I don't know, because it's on the Paramount Plus, fucking another goddamn subscription network I want me to get.
That
comes out
next
Thursday
already.
Oh, what do you?
I've been watching Survivor with my friend for like 4 years, but we take like months off, so I try to cancel it, but the cancel subscription doesn't work.
That's what they get you by not allowing you to cancel.
Yeah, so be careful when you're signing up for that. There's nothing on it. Like, I've never seen a streaming service that you have to pay for that is so fucking barren of content.
It's basically like Spike TV, right? Isn't Paramount like Spike TV partially?
I think we get Spike TV through something else though in Canada.
I get it through cable, so like I'm old. I've got cable.
Like it might be a thing where Paramount Plus has more stuff in the States, and we only get like less than 40 shows on it.
Yikes!
And you don't even get all the Survivor seasons.
I'll be torrenting that. I mean, I'll be
watching it with George Lucas's footage.
I'm not even gonna pretend. I'm gonna torrent it. Come at me, Paramount Plus.
Paramount. Someone did try to suggest that we go on a Star Wars Celebration panel, but there's no way we're getting asked to do a panel ever.
Oh God, no.
Individually, maybe, but not as Tapcaf transmission.
I got invited to do a panel this year, but I don't think I'm gonna go. But I was invited as part of somebody else's panel, so I doubt. I've applied for Star Wars Celebration before, and they've rejected me. I might apply again this year, just for shits and giggles, just to see whether all my Marvels or Star Wars is complicit in Marvel's comic book art tracing has gotten me on their shit list.
We're renegades. We say it like it.
They're exposing the Akbar Winter retcon. They're not allowed on.